You ever walk away from a conversation and think, why didn't I say the thing that I should have said? Like the moment just passed. Your mind went blank, your throat locked up, your brain just like froze in the moment. And you didn't necessarily lose your words, but your nervous system pulled the emergency brake. I was in a car once, I'll never forget this, passenger seat, very good friend that I thought was a good friend driving the car. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they said something so ugly to me. And I don't remember what they actually said, like the words. And, they say we don't remember content, we remember stories and feelings and our emotions and reactions. All I could do was stare out the window and try not to cry. And I couldn't bring myself, like physically. It was like I was trapped in some sort of barrier. I couldn't bring myself to say anything to address the situation. It's hard to put into words these types of feelings, but maybe you can relate because all I could do was sit there and stare out the window and fume internally. And it was forever until I started to learn to manage my brain. And then that changed everything. And all of a sudden, I've got full control over that. Like, doesn't happen anymore. And it's amazing because I used to get so mad at myself for not responding in the moment the way I wanted to, like do the thing, say the thing, but I couldn't will myself to be involved in that type of confrontation. And now I know it's because I've got a survival instinct. Mine is to freeze. And I am one of the owls. And if you don't know your survival instinct archetype yet, you need to go to charliehornetscoaching.com/quiz and find out yours. And then you'll get a free cheat sheet and a whole bunch of other goodies to learn all about how to manage your archetype. But I grew up around a lot of archetypes those first 15 years of my life, and then the next 15 years trying to manage my life. When conflict came up, my nervous system just seemed to be trained to shut down or to have some like super bizarre trigger response, like cry when I'm angry. And when people freeze like that, it's not because there's some kind of talent that you can't seem to master that everybody else can, but that's how it feels. But it's not you. And if any of this sounds familiar, if you keep playing and replaying moments when you have frozen instead of speaking up, saying the thing, doing the thing, if any of that sounds familiar, then this episode is for you. Let's go.
I'm Dr. Charlie Hornes, highly anxious people pleaser turned master certified professional life coach. Learning to manage my brain was so life-changing for me that I got certified so that I could teach these incredible evidence-based practices to you. Are you ready for massive change? Let's go.
Welcome to the Art of Managing Your Brain. I'm Dr. Charlie Hornes. I am a doctorate level, clinically certified spiritual counseling provider and a master certified ThoughtWork strategist. I focus on burnout prevention. I help high functioning and high achieving people stop spiraling into that awful silence and rumination and overthinking and self blame, which leads to what I call a category 5 burnout event. And you don't have to do that. It's unnecessary and preventable suffering. So we start by rewiring the internal system that's running your life in the background. And today we are going to get into why you freeze. And we all have those moments, but there are some of us, like myself, who I identify as my survival archetype, the owl, which if you don't know your archetype yet, you need to run to my quiz. It's a free quiz, charliehornetscoaching.com/quiz. Find out your survival archetype. And you may think you know it, but there's a lot more going on under the surface. So just, trust me here. And then you'll also get an emailed downloadable one-page cheat sheet to get you started on your journey of where you are on your burnout collapse curve and how we can get started preventing any further damage. So why do you freeze? And not metaphorically, but biologically, because your voice doesn't disappear. It got silenced by a survival pattern that thinks silence equals safety. I know that about myself. Sometime, somewhere along the way, I couldn't even tell you when, I learned that if I got mixed up in conflict, if I got too loud, if I got too big for my britches, right? It wasn't safe. If that sounds remotely familiar, then it is time to grab yourself a cup of coffee and a notebook because this episode is really gonna hit. But before we get into that, don't forget the burnout quiz. This is a free quiz, the burnout archetype, and it's less than 3 minutes. It will show you exactly which survival instinct is running your nervous system right now. And once you take the quiz, you're going to unlock the burnout prevention playbook. And this is a $97 brand new guide that I am releasing soon. It's exactly the same layout of the infrastructure of the scope and sequence that I teach in my 5,000 plus private coaching programs. And I know that there are people that that's just not gonna cut it, right? And you still need this information. So I have these really cool digital products that you can grab and start to learn this stuff and do some self coaching on your own. And this is something you're going to get instantly. So just go to charliehornetscoaching.com/quiz and get started. All right, let's talk about the moment that you freeze. Maybe it was during a staff meeting or with your partner or even in line at the doctor's office. Your mouth said nothing, but your mind was screaming and your body went wild like live wire. Some people start breathing heavier and some people start shaking. Some people start getting weird, feelings of like hotness in different parts of their body. It's a very physiological situation when you're dealing with the freeze instinct. That's not indecision. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not that you can't get it right like everybody else seems to get it right. It's not people pleasing. It's not passivity. It's called the freeze response. And it's actually a reaction because you have no control over it. And it's the most misunderstood about the survival instincts. Freeze doesn't mean stuck. It doesn't mean you don't actually have words. It doesn't mean you don't know what you feel, what you think, what you want to do. Most people that freeze have been practicing that comeback to that person who has been triggering them for the last 3 years, and they know exactly what they want to say. The problem is your body won't let you do it. What does this mean? It means that you're actually strategic. It means that your nervous system couldn't detect safety in the room. So it shut the gates because silence feels safer than opening your mouth and taking a risk. And that may frustrate you, but your brain 1,000% believes it's the best move. And here's one of the biggest pieces of this. Freezing actually can masquerade as the strong and silent type. And the problem with this is the people that freeze are beating themselves up internally. So you don't feel strong and silent, even if you're coming across to others as strong and silent. And then people misinterpret and they think that they can pile more on you. And then you freeze more. And it becomes a vicious cycle, which leads to burnout. This is one of those little like micro prevention moments is that when you're frozen, people see it as stoicism and strength. And that's not usually what's happening within us, right? And then we go home and we beat ourselves up and we ruminate and we lose sleep. And then we're even more miserable the next day. And it just goes on and on and on. And you really do start the downward spiral if you're in a situation where you're freezing way too much. It can look like control, poise, composure. Then you can get rewarded, promoted, applauded. But you start to feel invisible because suddenly your insides are not matching your outsides. You feel awful, and people just continue to pile on you and say whatever they want and think that you can handle it. And eventually you're going to collapse. You see, owls, they're not quiet because of weakness. They're quiet because they were taught silence is how you survive high stakes, high stress, high anxiety, conflict in the room. And that logic, it doesn't come from insecurity, even though you feel like it does because you're beating yourself up over it and you're not doing the thing you wish you were doing. It comes from decades of pattern recognition, your brain seeing it. If that's you, this episode isn't about finding your voice. It's about unfreezing the voice you've never lost. It's always been there. Owls have a dominant freeze instinct, a shutdown mechanism that activates when neither flight, fight, or fawning feel viable. Now, what does that mean? That means that in the animal kingdom, animals within nanoseconds can determine if they can win a fight, if they have to run and they have enough time to get away, or if they need to stop and hope whomever is posing the threat keeps walking. That's what's happening. Your brain has determined you can't win the fight. There's not enough time to run away. So you're going to stop and hope they go away. That's what your brain is doing. That's why you don't move, you don't make a sound, you don't have the thing to say, even though you practice it all night, right? It's because your brain doesn't want you to say the two words. Your brain is afraid it will call attention to the predator, and then you're dead meat. Sometimes it's not trauma. Sometimes there are significant things that have happened to train our brain to believe this is not safe. That somewhere your brain had a bad experience when you did push back, when you did speak up. And that's like, the gazelle yelling at the lion stalking by, hey, I'm over here in the bushes. No, it stands stiff because it knows it's not going to beat up the lion. Ain't happening. Here's the neurobiology of the freeze response. And this is the owl edition for my Parliament circle out there. Hi to any of you if you're watching. And again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I did do all of my research on this stuff because it was my experience. And my, super nerdy brain had to get to the bottom of what happened to me. And when my category 5 burnout event almost took me out, my solace was knowing what happened. I had to know what happened because I was smart, I was talented, I was capable. I had, Ivy League education, went to the seminary in the Columbia University affiliation, and I became a board certified chaplain, which is in and of itself a several year postgraduate, very rigorous program. There was nothing wrong with me. It's that my brain thought that Bobbin Accounting was a threat. So first step, identify what your archetype is. You probably have a really good idea of what it is, but maybe it's not your dominant one. So we have to work on that. And then we have to figure out what are the steps to start preventing, if you're canoeing, right? And there's a hurricane in the Gulf and you're upstream, we want to stop you upstream before you're downstream. And then you're in, the estuary, which is where salt water and fresh water mix. That's where things get really complicated. And then all of a sudden you're in the Gulf and a Cat 5 is hitting you in the face. We're going to prevent that upstream. The dorsal vagal shutdown. This triggers energy conservation, right? This is your energy conservation mode. So slow heart rate, low energy, reduced facial expression, zoning out. That's one of the types of freezing. Your nervous system pulls that emergency brake. Amygdala hijacking. This is when there's no exit detected. It says, don't move, don't speak, don't be noticed. It's not indecision, it's neurobiological risk calculation. Cortisol and norepinephrine spikes. These are those lovely neurotransmitters that your brain dumps and they cascade through your body. Stress hormones, they flood your body right before you freeze. Now it's the chemicals that make you feel horrible. So you're stuck. So now you're drenched with cascading neurochemicals that feel horrible, and you can't even move and get rid of them because you get rid of them with movement, and they stay, a couple of hours, I think, in your body. So once freeze hits, the HPA axis, this sort of like control center, dampens. It shifts from fight or flight because it knows you cannot survive either, and it moves to immobilization. Prefrontal cortex dropout. This is when your executive function tanks, your frontal brain, your evolved adult thinking brain. The thing is that your adult thinking brain always defers to your survival mechanism, and they are, one and the same. You know, it's one system, but if your thinking brain always keeps control, then you're going to have to think about whether or not you should jump out of the way of the oncoming bus. That's why you have the prefrontal cortex dropout when there's some sort of seeming threat that your amygdala has identified. It's just like determining, oh, should I jump out of the way of this bus or not? Like your survival mechanism will not let you think because it knows best, right? You have to know what it is that you need to do, and then you need to know how to do it, right? It's the how to. Now, a lot of that will be in my playbook. So grab the quiz, and then you'll get that one-time offer of $9.97 for a $97 cinematic overview of the scope and sequence of this burnout prevention infrastructure that I have that will help you learn all of this stuff. Because once you understand that this is just your brain, there's nothing wrong with you. There's actually nothing wrong with anybody else either. A, you're giving them all of your power by the way you're interpreting the things that they say and do, which is thought work. And B, you are taking credit for stuff that's not yours, like your survival instinct, your owl reaction, your deer reaction, your lion reaction. This is what happens when you're in certain circumstances. That's all it is. That's it. There's nothing wrong with you. So we have to stop thinking first something's wrong with us. Your brain is doing what it's supposed to do. You're going to have to learn how to override your survival instinct. That is what learning to manage your brain is all about. Next, glutamate flooding. This is a huge one for the freeze reaction. Glutamate flooding is overthinking. It's excess glutamate in your brain. And that is a very important chemical that you need to know if you're an owl. Excitotoxicity. What is that? This mimics ADHD and OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. It mimics depression. It's looped survival coding. So let me tell you something about that moment that you opened your mouth to speak and nothing came out, right? You have the words. You know what you want to say. When your brain comes back online, you're like, why didn't I say the thing? It's not that you don't know what to say. We cannot, because our brain says, shut it down. We're not safe. It's not fear, it's not shyness, it's glutamate. Think of glutamate like the gas pedal in your brain. It gets the neurons firing, the neurons talking to each other. It helps you remember things. It helps you stay alert when something important is happening. But there's a problem. When you've been living in a high pressure world for too long, especially one that taught you to stay small because of, whatever happened in your story that taught your brain that this level of conflict, even small, is equivalent to dead, that taught you to stay quiet, to be agreeable. Your nervous system starts mistaking discomfort for danger. So yeah, it's not comfortable to deal with people that don't think before they speak, that don't understand their thoughts are not real, and that the words that are running through their brains were literally generated on the spot by their brain. but through the lens and experience and story that they interpret the world through, and they think they're entirely right. What's the solution? We have to start practicing raising our threshold level of tolerance of discomfort, because your brain, your nervous system, currently is mistaking discomfort for potential dead. And the gas pedal, it stays stuck. You have to get control of it. You own it. It doesn't own you. You override the default settings. Your thinking brain hands it over all the time, hands the reins to the survival mechanism all day long, all day long. I mean, it's your survival mechanism typically that is like running the show. And you have to physically take it back. There are things like early childhood origins, and that is all kinds of stuff. We have to always also have our trauma-informed care thinking hat on whenever we look at this stuff, because our brain learns this somewhere, right? It picks up one of the four possibilities of reaction in a dangerous situation. You can fight the threat, you can run from the threat, you can freeze and hope it keeps walking by and not make a peep, because otherwise it will eat you, right? Or the more evolved fawning, which is people pleasing, but that, I mean, basically that's accommodating, right? We are dealing with disproportionate levels of reactions from other people that also are dealing with their own survival instincts, that they're not managing their brains. And when you're a child, a lot of the time, you can't fight, you can't run, so you're left with two options. That's why freezing and fawning are two of the higher levels of results for most people, because they learned the things when they were younger, because your brain is, it's still learning, even if you don't have the conscious memories. We work on raising our threshold level of tolerance to discomfort, even if it's minimally. We work on it every day. You have got to raise your tolerance level of discomfort. And number two, we sensory override. We exit freeze mode through movement. You sway, you hum, there's getting up, there's countering, there's walking backwards, right? Touching your skin, grounding yourself, kicking your shoes off and putting your feet on the ground. Physical movement reactivates your thinking brain. Movement really helps the whole cycle. Then you want to name your pattern, right? You don't want to say, I'm overthinking, I'm ruminating, here I go again, I can't stop thinking. You don't want to say any of that. You want to say, wow, my owl's activated, look at her go. This is a freeze, not a failure. My brain thinks something's lurking that's a threat. What does it think's a threat? Bob? Bob's not a threat. Nah, he's not. He's just an asshole. It's not failure. So the paralysis is just you trying to find the right word, the right thing. You're afraid of being misunderstood, of being judged, of being excluded, right? Owls anticipate social fallout. So they hit pause, the brain hits pause. But power doesn't live in perfect wording. It doesn't live in perfect stuff. It doesn't live in losing the argument with the person who thinks that their words are, real. Power lives in presence. You are a brilliant futurist trapped in survival systems that taught you speaking up was equivalent to death. So you're not failing, you're adapting. But your adaptation isn't the same thing as sovereignty, as having control, as managing your brain. And this is where you get to choose again. Not an owl. Find your archetype. Run to my quiz, charliehornetscoaching.com/quiz, and find out, are you part of my parliament of owls, my lion's den, my deer herd, or my fox skulk? And if you're not aware, I blog, and if you're not getting those, then you need to subscribe to the newsletters, where you're going to get all of my weekly information and what I'm putting out there and all the stuff I'm beta testing and classes I want to get your perspective on. And so you'll get special offers and things like that. So just go to charliehornetscoaching.com/subscribe and you will join the newsletter. So friend, this week, I want you to remember that you're not weak, you're adaptive. But silence isn't your strategy anymore. You've got to start to lead your brain, not follow it. So take the quiz, outsmart that burnout storm. Let's start preventing it upstream before things get worse. First step, discover your survival archetype instinct today. Next week, guess what next week is? Next week is episode 50. Yay! I'm hitting my 50th episode and I'm so excited about that. So next week, we're going to be diving into the hidden cost of brilliance. Yes, head first, we're going into that. Because high functioning, high achieving people doesn't mean high capacity. Now, again, this is another one of those words I hate, capacity. Like, I don't know, some coaching bullshit word, right? What is capacity? It means your ability to, like, how many things can you hold, right? And ride a bike. What is your capacity level of doing things? And is it equivalent to the things everybody expects you to do, right? So just because you're high functioning and a high achiever does not mean you have a high level of capacity more than anybody else. You don't. So that's what we're going to get into next week, because that's the problem with being brilliant. So my friend, remember, silence isn't your story's ending. It's really just the beginning of your journey. I hope you'll join me. All right, I'll see you next week. Take care.